WonderWorks was made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, with additional funding from viewers like you and the National Endowment for the Arts.
This is PBS.
WonderWorks is brought to you locally by American Medical Systems, serving the needs of patients and physicians with innovative medical products. St. Andrew's Lutheran Church in Montemedi, providing programs and activities to help families grow together. Unisys Corporation, manufacturers of commercial and defense information systems and related products. And by your neighborhood Catholic schools, more than a school system, a value system.
If you can't go to see all the wildlife you'd like, then learn how to create an animal habitat in your own backyard on Attracting Wildlife. Marty Stauffer will show you how on Wild America.
Tonight at 7, here on Channel 2.
Sunday's broadcast schedule is brought to you in part by Rotland Homes and Rotland Townhomes, innovators in design and lasting value, a builder for life in the Twin Cities. The Bank of Maple Plain, serving Maple Plain and the surrounding communities since 1905, the family bank that makes the difference. And by the members of Channel 2.
What steps can you and your family take in your own home to help survive the drought and preserve Minnesota's fresh water? It's a tough challenge, and that's why this week you can play along when Mark Rosen and his family and Geraldine Steele Battle and her family face off in the great Minnesota water fight Tuesday night at 8 here on Channel 2.
The following program is broadcast in stereo.
Almanac is a production of KTCA TV for the stations of Minnesota Public Television.
Just what will make legislators agree on the state budget? Just why hasn't it happened yet? And just when will I stop asking these questions? Now, because this is just the tease and it's supposed to be short. Good evening, I'm Jan Smaby. Eric Escala and I will ask our political panel many questions later on in tonight's show. We'll probably ask many of the same questions to Senator Rudy Boschwitz. And we'll also ask questions, but probably different ones, of choreographer Bill T. Jones. We think we know what our questions will be, but not the answers because this is a live show. Hear them along with us tonight on Almanac.
Funding for Almanac is provided in part by Larkin, Hoffman, Daly, and Lindgren, attorneys at law, providing complete legal services for Minnesotans. Norstan Incorporated, a distributor for telecommunications equipment products, including IBM Rome. Browning Ferris Industries, providing environmentally sound solid waste solutions. Minnesota's credit unions, people helping people. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, providing more than 1 million Minnesotans with the care behind the card. And Gabbert's Furniture and Design Studio of Edina. There's no place like home, and there's no place like Gabbert's. Arts reporting on Almanac is presented through a grant from Super America and its 95 employee-operated stores throughout Minnesota.
From time to time on Almanac, we've headed down to the bowels of the Capitol to check in with those who must endure the legislative session most directly. Besides legislators, that is. We're talking about the Capitol reporters. KTCA's Jim Bickle ventured down yesterday for their assessment of this legislative session.
How would you characterize the accomplishments of the legislature's session so far?
Lackluster, indecisive. It's sort of a session that looks like it's going to end with a whimper. So.
Meager to modest. They're not. There wasn't a big agenda in the first place. They're arguing over what amounts to, in a state budget, small change.
It's kind of the limbo session because until they reach an agreement on these money issues, nobody can do anything. I guess you could say it's sort of on the respirator right now. It's kind of brain-dead session.
I just wrote a column for my paper kind of comparing the situation to Waiting for Godot, in which the two tramps are waiting for this person who never shows up and feeling that everything's meaningless and there's no order to the universe.
If there's a real surprise this year, I think it's the legislature's discovery of marijuana, or rediscovery of marijuana. We've been talking about the drug war over crack, cocaine, crank, all these other illegal substances, and the federal drug czar comes to town and tells the state that their marijuana laws are kind of piddly, and all of a sudden we've got marijuana laws coming out our ears.
Any predictions on when we're going to get done here? Or,
Well, I'm in the pool for Wednesday, but I think I'm going to lose. It looks like it's going to be the end of next week.
If this session had a living will, they would have unplugged it by now.
Well, the headlines started early this week, and they just kept on coming. On Monday, it was reported that a Saudi Arabian prince had promised a Minnesota animal rights activist $1 million to save dogs and cats from being put to sleep. Well, as the week went on, details of the prince's possible illegal activities in Florida came to light. Also on Monday, a West Concord, Minnesota high school teacher was indicted on 100 felony counts of sexual abuse. The school's principal and superintendent also were indicted for allegedly failing to report the abuse, and we'll have more on that one later. On Monday night, 2 Duluth police officers were shot while investigating a tavern shooting. Tuesday, one of the officers died. Later on Tuesday, Chippewa Indians in northern Wisconsin began their annual spearfishing activity. Protesters were present, but no violence was reported. And yesterday, 3 Minnesotans were awarded Pulitzer Prizes for their writing efforts. One was playwright August Wilson, who received his second Pulitzer for the play The Piano Lesson. And the prize for investigative reporting went to a Minnesota duo, Star Tribune staff writer Lou Kilzer and his colleague Chris Eisen, and they picked up the Pulitzer Prize for their series on arson in St. Paul. Thanks, fellas. Congratulations. Well, Lou, let me start with you, because you won one of these before, shared one at the Denver Post. I see how this, Eisen and you guys come up with the story, and you sit there and you say, I know the various components to get a Pulitzer Prize-winning series, and you sort of proceeded from there. Do you go out to win one of these? Is that how it works? Or?
No, that's not how it works. As a matter of fact, this one was very, as it started, very unlikely that it would fit any traditional mode for winning such a prize, because I've noticed in journalism that there are certain formulas, and usually the prize winners tend to be more generic stories. You can always be sure that if you do a certain type of story on a social issue, issues of children, which when I had won an earlier prize in Denver, it had to do with the missing children issue. Those are more guaranteed. This was a very, very local prize, a very unique situation, and one that cannot be transported elsewhere. I doubt if the facts and circumstances would be the same.
Chris, did you get it all? Do you feel like you got the full story? Is there more there? I mean, Conroy's still on the job after all.
Well, we wrote what we knew, and we didn't try to stretch anything. We said what we knew, and that's what our job is, and what happens to Conroy after that or anybody else isn't up to us. All we could do is write what we thought was a good story, and that's what we did.
How do you get nominated for consideration for a Pulitzer?
Well, the papers, it's one of the easiest things in the world, actually, is to get nominated for a Pulitzer Prize because the paper can nominate.
Your own newspaper can nominate you?
Own paper nominates, and then a committee, and believe me, I don't really understand the process all the way through, but a committee then selects 3 finalists. And unfortunately anymore, you always know you're a finalist. The word gets out. Secrets, reporters don't keep secrets very well. And then you sweat it out from then on. We had another very fine entry this year, Stormy Greener, in photography, and unfortunately she would know that she's a finalist, and as it turned out, she did not win. And so that's kind of a bit of a burden and a bit of a distraction.
Is it
Well,
easy to
you
work
two
as
have
a
worked, yeah, I was just going to say, you two have
teamwork, yeah.
worked as a team, and now you've won a Pulitzer as a team. Does that mean that you're going to be sort of permanently teamed, bonded, married together?
Boy.
Woodward and Bernstein type of deal?
Lou probably wouldn't want that, but...
No, I think that we're going to stay working together for some time. It's more or less up to editors to decide what our life is going to be like in the next year or so.
Are you on the trail of more investigative reports?
Well, we're working on stuff.
Such as?
Didn't get a lot done today, but of course we can't say much about what we're working on, but we're working on some stuff that we've picked up along the way, and whether it becomes a story or not, we don't know.
Now this opens career doors for people, doesn't it? I mean, bright lights, big city, bigger papers, books. I mean, what's in the future for you guys? Something along that line, or content here in the Twin Cities, or?
Lou knows
well,
better than I
I'm
do.
closing on a house, perhaps, next month, so it kind of takes a look. It kind of looks like Minnesota's here for me for a long time. I chose this place, and I did at one point have a few options, and this was the nicest place I found.
And the editors of the Minneapolis paper, I know, were thrilled because St. Paul had won a couple Pulitzers, so I suppose this is especially sweet for the structure over there, huh, Chris?
Well, they don't like to compare it to anybody else's Pulitzers, but everybody's real happy, and it's a nice thing for the paper.
What is the
and
most,
for a lot of people at the paper, too.
What is the most sincere congratulations you've received to date?
A lot of our colleagues have called. This city, or these cities, are blessed with 2 very fine newspapers, and I'd have to say that some people at the other newspaper offered congratulations to us for this effort, and certainly I hope we did the same when they won, because it's not, there aren't a lot of newspapers, or a lot of cities in the country that have 2 high-quality newspapers.
Well, it says a lot for journalism in the entire state, and we're proud of you, and thanks very much. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thanks,
for agreeing
fellas.
to come on,
Appreciate it.
gentlemen. No, I don't. Minnesota Senator Rudy Boschwitz came out swinging in a fundraising letter a couple of weeks ago. He asked for money from his supporters, in his words, to help clean up the state's embarrassing mess. But the funny thing is, he was swinging at someone else's opponent, Minnesota's other Rudy, the governor, Rudy Perpich. Well, on Tuesday of this week, Republican leaders announced their goals and kind of a plan for the upcoming campaign season. Rudy Boschwitz is one of the candidates running. He was there on Tuesday, and he joins us here tonight. I'm going back to 1984 for a second, Senator. You and Rudy Perpich declared, I think, some sort of non-aggression, pals truce. You liked each other, ethnic roots, da-da-da, you were friends. Joan Groh was out there looking for the governor to help her. It didn't happen. And now you follow, it's like you guys are running against each other. What happened?
No. We're not running against one another, but there's no question that he has come on very, very strong and has picked up the cudgel. He's behind, he knows it, and when you're behind in politics, you attack.
Are you saying he started this? Do you think he's the one who leveled the first attack against you?
You've seen a lot of fundraising letters, I presume, in your day, and whether they're Republican or Democrat, they sometimes are not taken very seriously. But Rudy wants to rally his party behind him, and I understand that. If my polls look like his, I would too.
Senator, would you size up your opponents for us? Let's take each one very quickly. I mean, Tom Berg, Jim Nichols, Paul Wellstone. How do you size them up?
You see, when you're ahead, you try to forget the names of your opponents almost.
Well, that's sizing them up, right?
Yeah, when you're behind, on the other hand, you attack, as Rudy does. And his polls, which are 24% of Minnesotans think that he should be reelected, and 71% say that he shouldn't be reelected, I'd come out swinging too.
Do you have any concerns at all that you could possibly suffer a defeat in the upcoming November election?
Of course. I mean, a Republican in this state, kind of an endangered species. We're not the majority party. We have to fight uphill. You have to assume at all times. I just outwork the opponents, you bet.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that Democrats say about you. One is that you're preoccupied with fundraising and do it very well, but do too much of it. Now, here's what I want to ask.
Yes.
Is there anything in the current system that allows candidates to raise money that you think should be changed? Or do you think the status quo is fine?
Sure.
What should be changed?
Eric, you're going to have to take more than just a few minutes of this, but soft money should be changed.
Explain what that is for people.
Soft money is money that comes from outside of the system, that is not counted, that it does not go into the candidate's campaign. For instance, there are controls on the president's campaign. It's all public money. You can only spend so much, but yet twice as much was spent in the 1988 campaign as in the 1984 campaign. It's the fastest growing expenditure.
You mean you set up a little committee off the side?
No, you don't set up a committee. Committees are set up for you. You can have nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Great wads of soft money is spent. Fine, PACs. PACs can be changed.
Limits on PAC contributions?
Sure.
I mean, it's a bipartisan deal. You've got a lot. Sikorsky's got a lot. I mean, it's a bipartisan problem.
But Sikorsky has 75 or 80% of the money that he receives coming from PACs. I have 14%.
You want a limit on PACs or not?
Sure, we'll put a limit on PACs. That's perfectly okay with me.
Would you want a limit on the amount of money that could be spent on campaigns? Does it bother you when you hear about the millions?
Yes, but you have to understand, Jan, if you limit the amount of money spent on campaigns, a guy like me who has 100% name recognition, who has a press secretary, who has a franking privilege, who has a staff, who has the office, who's invited to programs like this quite a bit, has a great advantage. So if you establish limits, you're going to give an additional advantage to the incumbent.
Democrats say you've abused that franking privilege, that you sent out invitations to the super-duper milk house. And
oh, no. I think that in that case we didn't use the franking privilege.
Well, give us your defense for you haven't abused it.
Oh, no, of course not. I have stayed within the rules of the Senate.
Which are what? Are they pretty loose or are they strict?
No, they're very restrained. For instance, in the House, you don't have to report at all. Mm-hmm. You have never seen the amount of money that a House member has spent in the franking privilege. There are no restraints. In the Senate, there are restraints, and we have to publish the amount we spend. The restraints were lifted for a short time. I took advantage of the lifting, and that's perfectly proper and perfectly legal, and I would do it again.
Senator, let's turn to some of the issues that may or may not be a part of the senatorial campaign that you will be involved in. Let me start with one that's gotten so much attention this past year, and that is abortion. Do you sense, based on your travels around Minnesota to date, that abortion and the issue of abortion will be a factor in your Senate campaign?
Right now it's hard to sense, Jan. It really is, because right now we're in a caucus period, we're in this political convention period. Of course, that's why Rudy's whooping it up against me, because he wants to unite his party in his behalf, and this is the time to whoop up against, he can't whoop it up against Grunseth or Printy or these other people. He doesn't want to make their names too well known, so he picks me. But as a result, abortion and choice are far more important at the moment in the political convention caucus time than I think that they will be throughout the balance of the campaign.
What about the issue of agriculture? You've since you've been in the Senate, have sort of taken on the mantle of being one of the leaders in the Senate on agricultural issues. One of your opponents, Commissioner Jim Nichols, has said for quite some time that he would like to do away with all subsidies for farmers. How do you feel about that particular issue?
Well, of course, Commissioner Nichols wants to put something there instead. He wants to put very high loan rates, and he wants to build barriers against world trade. I would not choose that particular direction. I think that the 1985 Farm Bill has worked very, very well, and I think we should reenact the 1985 Farm Bill and add some flexibility, and which is a suggestion that I have made, and I think a suggestion that will be taken.
Did the Nichols-Humphrey lawsuit threat gets Secretary of Agriculture Yider to hold these hearings? Is that what happened?
Oh, I don't think that the lawsuit hurt, but I really don't think it helped.
Why not? They threatened it, and there were the hearings. I mean, no?
The hearings didn't quite come about that way. Mind you, Eric, there have been a number of lawsuits. Milk marketing orders have gone to the Supreme Court 5 or 6 times. Each time they have been found to be legal, and so lawsuits really weren't that threatening. However, Clayton Yoder, the new Secretary of Agriculture, was the USTR, the United States Trade Representative. He was the guy who went around the world trying to break down trade barriers. As soon as he became Secretary of Agriculture, I went to him and I said, there's only one trade barrier that's internal within the United States. It applies to the commodity of milk, and we ought to bring it down. He agreed from the very beginning. The first Secretary of Agriculture in 50 years, I might say, who would agree with that type of an approach.
Will that system be changed in the 90 Farm Bill so that Minnesota...
No, it won't be changed.
Why not?
I offered an amendment to change it in the Agriculture Committee in 1985, lost 14-2.
Okay.
There are 35 states that benefit by the milk marketing orders.
And how many are hurt?
5 or 6, 10 probably neither hurt nor helped, so that just are not the votes. However, it can be changed administratively. The Secretary of Agriculture does have the ability to make some changes. That's why we went to him. Neither Secretary Berglund or Block or Ling, the other 3 who have served in Washington, had any interest. It's a hot potato politically. You know, in 1985, I introduced the Orange Equity Act. When I lost by 14-2 on milk marketing orders, I said, I want to have marketing orders for oranges. Some of my milk dairy farmers up in Minnesota who are answering the call of the cows twice a day, 7 days a week, would much rather grow oranges. And if you would give us a subsidy so that we could produce oranges by every large population center and institute milk marketing orders for oranges, of course.
You're making a point there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Senator, we unfortunately just have seconds left. Other than agriculture, what would be the issue you would want to bring to prominence in your campaign for Minnesotans?
Well, agriculture, foreign affairs, drugs, the environment, the Clean Air Bill we just passed had quite a role in that. Did a good job. That was a good environmental bill.
Well, I hope we'll have you back time and time again during the campaign, and maybe with some of your DFL opponents that you wouldn't even mention tonight. Rudy Boschwitz, thanks a lot, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. One of the more startling headlines of the week came on Monday when a West Concord, Minnesota teacher was booked on over 100 counts of sexual abuse of a female student. But not only the teacher was indicted, the high school principal and district superintendent were also charged with misdemeanor offenses that they knew about the teacher's alleged sexual involvement with the student but failed to report it to civil authorities. The 2 were charged under Minnesota's unusual child abuse reporting law. Phil William is an attorney who represents other teachers in the West Concord case who had talked to school authorities, but not civil authorities, and Philip William has raised concerns about the reporting law. Norm Coleman is with the State Attorney General's office, and Gary Schoner is a counselor in sexual abuse cases. Norm Coleman, how did this law come about, and what really is its intended purpose?
When you say the law, there are really 2 parts. One is the Child Abuse Reporting Act, which came into being in Minnesota in 1975. At issue here are the parts of that statute, that law, that relate to teachers. It's interesting in terms of child abuse reporting. The history of American English jurisprudence is that you don't mandate people to do anything for government. What the legislature has done with children is saying in certain situations where children are under the supervision of somebody or under the authority of be it parent, teacher, etc., that they can't report it themselves. And so what we do is we mandate certain professionals in the social services, education, healing arts, things like that. We mandate them to come forward with this information. In 1975, we did that initially in Minnesota with doctors. In 1980, we added other professionals. In 83, we added teachers. In 88, we added clergy.
Phil, is the concept appropriate, or is it just a basically flawed concept, or does the law need some fine-tuning, or how's it working?
The concept is good. I think all of us who are advocates believe that children need to be safe in the home, school, and community. The problem for professional people, and in this case teachers, is that the law is really not that clear. The teachers don't really understand what they have to report and when. The Minnesota Education Association, who's been very involved and very concerned about this problem, is doing everything that they can to educate the teachers and get the word out in the hope of preventing this kind of problem.
Doesn't the law just say if you have reason to believe there's some abuse going on, you report it to authorities? That seems fairly clear.
Well, what is reason to believe? That's part of the problem. The teachers don't understand what that means. It's difficult for us to explain to them what in fact it means. What we are basically telling the teachers now is if you have any doubts at all, you report.
Norm Coleman,
isn't that one of the problems? You have to distinguish what's the criminal liability. If you don't report when you have reason to believe, are you going to be charged? You should understand that when the law first came into being in 1975, there were about Hennepin County about 900 cases reported. 8 years later, there were close to 5,000 cases reported. Not a single prosecution. Not a single prosecution. We have had prosecutions a handful over the years. The reality is, separate whether you have criminal liability. Teachers know, doctors know, professionals know. If you have any question, report. What you have to look at here is what's your professional obligation, what's the right thing to do. You have to live in a cave not to know that there's an obligation to report if you have any question whether abuse has occurred.
But there is a gray area. A gray area is when you have gossip, rumor, hearsay, innuendo, and you don't have hard, cold facts that you have to go on. That's part of the problem. These professional people are leery about reporting on their own, especially if there's no merit to the allegations.
But Phil, we provide confidentiality for the reporters. We provide immunity from liability. I mean, the system, as you said, the system is set up to protect kids. Parents should understand that when their children are in school, if abuse occurs, teacher to student, that's going to be reported. Turn it over to the professionals and let them look into it.
Gary, is this fairly typical in the sexual assault or abuse cases that you become involved with, that there were other professionals, other parties who knew about what was going on but maybe failed to report that?
Well, that's not uncommon when you're dealing with physicians, psychotherapists, counselor types, and it's also not uncommon with teacher situations. But I think a bigger issue here is that the other side of the law says a good faith report, and the question is, what is good faith? What is required, back to Phil's point, for it to be a good faith report? How much do you have to know? How sure do you have to be?
Is it just hard to snitch on a colleague? Is that kind of the human nature aspect of this?
Well, that's a part of it, but we've got to look at what the implications are of making that report. Suddenly, and take the West Concord, you got a small town, you got a family involved, you got people that know other people. At what point do you know enough to say this is abuse? What was reported in the media in many instances were examples of bad teaching or contact between people that may have looked strange, but that isn't the same as sexual abuse.
But the key to the statute is not to put the burden on the teacher, on the professional, to ferret out, to investigate. The key is to simply, if there's any reason to believe, report, and then let the professionals make that decision. I mean, specifically, we don't want teachers to do investigations.
But Phil, you're saying that's not a real world. It doesn't seem to work that way all the time.
You know, teachers are a very proud profession, and their community usually is a very small one. And usually they're very much concerned about having to report on a fellow colleague. The flip side of that is teachers really, because of the nature of the job, love children. And teachers, more than I think any other profession, hate to see children abused, neglected in any way whatsoever. So it's a difficult call, and that's why we tell them if you have any concerns, you do report, regardless of who you're going to be making the report against.
Norm, why were the charges filed in this particular case against the superintendent and the principal? Because that has been a rare occurrence.
I can't comment on this particular case. I haven't looked at all the papers. It is a rare occurrence that charges are filed. There's no question about that. We know that probably 20% at most of abuse that goes on is reported. We have a problem. In this case, it may be that the facts are so outrageous, so egregious, that charges were simply brought. It certainly sends a message when charges are filed. It sends a message to all the others out there. If you have any question, report the abuse.
Is that, Gary, yeah, is that going to happen? Are they going to over-report or are they going to freeze?
It's hard to tell. They could do any of that. But I think there's a very important piece here that's not been mentioned in any of the media accounts. We're dealing here with a female teacher, an adolescent girl. That is a very rare type of situation. The male coach, male teacher is much more common. The fact is, I suspect when you see people holding hands or doing anything that looks strange, you don't necessarily assume sex in that situation. And I think what this is more likely to do is to get people to realize that under certain circumstances, women too can be abusers of young girls.
There's another issue I want to bring up, and that is not to suggest that was at play in this particular case, but it has come up in cases from time to time, and that is the issue of consent. Would you all clarify that? If the victim allegedly gave consent to the sexual abuse.
You can't consent it. We're talking with children, and we're talking about people in positions of responsibility or exercising supervisory control. And
so that absolutely is not allowed to be recognized.
In fact, in these cases, Gary's dealt with some of the cases with professionals, with adults. When you deal with somebody in a counseling or a psychological situation like that, consent isn't an offense even with adults.
We've got to wrap this up, so Norm, let me turn to you. Based on some of the concerns raised by Philip and by Gary, do you see that there is perhaps a need for some better clarification in the law, or is it just a matter of better education of the teachers and professionals?
There's no doubt in my mind that it's an issue of better education. The law was clarified a couple of years ago when there was some confusion, and the legislature worked on it and set up the standard, reason to believe, reason to know.
And I can represent to you that the Minnesota Education Association, which is the largest teacher union in the state, is at the forefront of educating its teachers and will continue to do so.
All right. Philip William, Gary Schoner, and Norm Coleman, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Ever since the Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane and Company Dance Company leapt onto the national dance scene 8 years ago, the group has been known for its innovative, emotional, socially conscious work. The company and its leader, Bill T. Jones, are currently in a month-long residency in the Twin Cities, collaborating with local dance groups on the creation of a new piece which is titled The Promised Land.
Bring your legs around, here, turn, arms, follow around. No, you don't turn. You take his arm, he's here, right? And you take his arm now you're turning.
The piece, which will eventually be part of a full-length work, The Last Supper at Uncle Tom's Cabin, will premiere at Northrop Auditorium next Saturday, April 21st. The evening will feature 2 additional pieces, one of which was created by Jones's partner, Arnie Zane, during his struggle with AIDS. Bill T. Jones joins us, and also with us is Dale Schutzlein, director of Northrop Auditorium, and Sage Coles, who is a participant in the project. Thank you all for joining us. How can I mess up the name Jones? But I managed to. We're delighted to have you here. Mr. Jones, I must go to you first. What has brought you to Minnesota to create a piece here in Minnesota with Minnesota dancers?
Well, as we'll talk about in the program, I'm sure, the arts, they need to be taken care of. And wherever you find enlightened people who say to you, come and share with us, and they provide dollars, you go. You go. And you try not to compromise yourself, but you go and you do your good work. And the Walker, the Minnesota Dance Alliance, the Xenon Dance Company, the New Dance Ensemble, the university, they've all been very kind in inviting us here.
Sage Coles, does this at all speak to the fact that in Minnesota we have had a long-time commitment to dance? We do have a number of dancers, and we've struggled off and on with various dance troupes in this community, that there's a wealth on which Mr. Jones can draw?
Increasingly, that's so. And we have several small dance companies, and we have a very active dance presenting series at Northrop, and the Walker Arts Center, lots of independent choreographers and dancers. So there is increasingly quite a well to choose from.
Now I have to ask you this. You're going to be a participant. Is that meaning that you're going to be dancing on stage again?
I'll say yes.
That's very exciting.
With pleasure and excitement.
Northrop Auditorium, how did you get involved in this whole arrangement?
Well, we've been presenting dance for quite some time, actually back to 1931. So, but The project came out of some work that Bill had been doing, and we had gotten involved. John Kalaki at the Walker had mentioned this project to us, and it sounded very exciting. And we, as Sage mentioned, had the good fortune to have 52 dancers for Bill to work with, and quite a wealth in this community. So it sounded like a real a winning project
Mr.
for
Jones,
us.
let me get into the issue here. Your partner, Mr. Zane, died of AIDS. As I've read through a lot of the reviews of your work, that's been brought up as a part of the sort of aspect of your work. And the larger question, I suppose, of the impact of AIDS on the artistic community. Can you kind of touch on that issue for us a little bit?
Well, you know, it's been talked about a lot, and so as not to trivialize it, I don't know, I'll try to say something fresh other than it's always a personal issue, but at this point in history, it's now become a public one. The AIDS touches on many, many of our boogaboos. There is homosexuality. There is the anal intercourse. Can I even say it on television?
We have? You
yes.
can.
Well, there's a particular stigma to this way of this death. Therefore, the artist has always been this person who has to respond to taboos and stigmas and look them boldly in the face and say, what can we do with this? So I think that the arts community has responded in a lot of different ways.
Has your approach or has your attitude about your work changed because of it, or is that too dramatic to say?
Oh yes, it has changed. It has changed. I feel that so many of my friends who are creative and artistic people have passed that it's my responsibility in some ways to pick up where they left off and to always ask myself in any situation, am I backing down here? Am I missing an opportunity to say something that must be said? Defiance is the first response I think an artist has. The work that I'm making here in some ways deals with that impulse. There's an angry one at first, and then there's one wherein you want to defy and transcend in a way. That's a very personal one. The question of what do you believe? Is there any meaning in life when 31, 32-year-olds, 22-year-olds die, drop, brilliant young people in the very first parts of their life? What meaning is there in life?
Yeah, one of the reviews, the review ended by the reporter saying that people were literally on the street coming out of your performance, jumping in the air and clicking their heels and doing pas de deux or whatever they do.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. That's one side of it. There's a piece called D-Man in the Waters that we will do here, which we quote Jenny Holzer, and she says, in a dream you saw a way to survive and you were filled with joy. That piece succeeds in that way. It was made with every bit of sadness in the company. It was changed into great joy. It's a very beautiful piece. There are sad pieces, and there are many, many troubling pieces to come that will ask difficult questions. Are all people with AIDS innocent? Right. That's a question that everybody has to answer for themselves.
Would you describe your style, your company's style, for those who may not have the opportunity to have seen you perform, may not make it on April 21st, but also in the context of something else that you talk about, which I believe the word you use is marginality. And if I understand that correctly, you talk about trying to reach people who are outside of the mainstream. Who is that, and how does your style relate to that?
That's a very complicated question.
I know it is.
Let's back all the way up, right? It's easy to say the work is a great deal about the beauty and sweat and effort. It's about passion. It's about intelligence at the service of passion. Then we talk about the work in terms of the body types of the people that I work with, and we can even talk about this community because I've tried to keep that going. Arnie was a very short white man. I'm a taller black man. We were liberated by certain dance techniques called contact improvisation that taught that you did not have to have perfectly pointed feet or be a ballerina to be a dancer. And Arnie could lift me, toss me around, do whatever. Women and men could interchange and exchange roles on the stage. That is a hallmark of our style of working right now. The work that we're doing here, yes, it deals with marginality, but marginality is a very, very subtle thing. I am lucky to have two very intelligent, older people working in my piece. Sage and her husband, John, are 60s and are in their 60s, and they're giving themselves completely to this. This encourages me to find out what can their bodies do, and what does it look like to have their bodies do something next to a 23-year-old. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What about the body naked? What about the body clothed? What about gay people? What about black people? In your own community, I have very few black people in this project. This was a question that has been troubling me since I got here. Why? Why are there no Native Americans in this project?
Sage, why not? Why not?
Well, I think we probably should have put out a call, you know, and didn't know enough about what you wanted and what you hoped for from the piece. But certainly to the extent that you did, that there were auditions and so forth, one of the striking things about working with Bill and this whole wonderful group of people is the range. I mean, there could be more. There could be many. There could be more.
Before we leave, Dale, could you give us the business side of this? Tickets are available, when it is, and how do we get tickets and everything, so we can do a little commerce here?
Right. It's Saturday night next week, the 21st, at 8 o'clock at Northrop Auditorium.
And tickets are still available.
Tickets are still available, 624-2345.
Terrific.
It would have been great to have had you here for the full hour, but we do encourage everyone to come and see all of you perform. This is exciting. Sage, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Sage Coles. Bill T. Jones, lovely to meet you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot.
And Dale Schatzline, thank you from Northrop for helping put this on.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Legislators continued to wrap up some issues this week. On Monday, the Senate passed a child protection bill which proposes to streamline the process of reporting and also creates a legislative commission on children. Also on Monday, the governor signed the minimum wage bill, which is intended to benefit minors and sets the state hourly rate at $4.25 per hour as of January 1. The Senate on Wednesday passed a bill to help local governments pay for damage to crops in anticipation of another grasshopper infestation this summer. A conference committee on Thursday agreed on a charitable gambling bill, but a tax provision added in a private session caused some controversy and stalled final agreement. And the session's last remaining bill issue, the budget, has yet to be resolved. Meetings were held again this week between DFL legislative leaders and the governor over whether to dip into the state's reserve fund, and again, there was no agreement. Now, legislators head home for the holiday weekend, but they've got their return tickets in hand. If they decide to venture out of their houses into public places this weekend, what will they hear? Our political panel has its respective ears to the ground. DJ Leary is a DFLer and publisher of Politics in Minnesota. Chris Sanda is an independent Republican activist who has been seen around the Capitol. Tom Horner is another independent Republican activist in good standing. And Pat Farcia consults DFLers and anyone else who's willing to listen. And none of these four will be on the dance stage at Northrop Auditorium Saturday, April 21st. Thank goodness. All right. DJ, I'd love to see you up there. DJ Leary, what do you think the Democrats are going to are hearing as they are home now for the Easter weekend?
I think there's going to be mixed messages. I've got to compliment Dennis McGrath of the Star Tribune this morning. He caught the flavor of a story that's been kind of whispered about around the Capitol for a few days, and that is that about 800,000 of you Minnesota friends and neighbors who have left your income tax preparation until this weekend are going to have a bit of a shock. This arcane debate about budget and tax spending is going to really come home because probably 200,000, about 25%, are going to be paying state taxes this year when they never had in the past. It doesn't have anything to do about higher taxes. It's because the withholding tables were done too low. But it's going to drive that point home. Now, prior to this information kind of getting out, it was thought that legislators would go home and basically the people that would beat up on them would be people working for city government, county government, maybe tax consumers whose programs were threatened to be cut. Now it looks like there might be a different battle out there, and we'll be interested to hear what they have to say when they get back on Tuesday.
Well, Tom, do you craft an issue out of this? I mean, the rainy day fund doesn't have everybody racing home to see what has happened on, on the 6 o'clock news during the day in this debate.
No, but I think DJ did hit the nail on the head, that it's that tax withholding that drives the issue home. It's the property taxes. It's those kind of pocketbook issues that over the course of the next several months will drive the issue home, that we've got a problem with spending in this state. And whether you cut the spending or take it out of the rainy day fund, chickens are coming home to roost.
How badly are the Democrats looking that they can't even come to an agreement themselves on this issue, Pat?
I don't think it helps that the session is continuing to drag on. I don't think their legislators are going to hear much of anything from constituents other than get it done. I really don't understand why this has dragged on as long as it has. There were people yesterday saying that this might drag out beyond the end of next week. And every additional day they're there, they place themselves, I think, in further risk.
Do you think, Chris Sanda, that in your home communities of the city and Staples, Minnesota as well, that the constituents are going to be pounding on their legislators not to raid the rainy day fund, or do you think it's more, as Pat has put it, just get done and get home?
I kind of think two things. People are more interested in Easter right now, I think, than they are in the legislative session, but they're glad to see their legislator back in the VFW pulling the pull tabs or whatever. But I think what they're going to say to that legislator is, get it over with, don't spend any more money, and for heaven's sakes, are you really going to run again? People are interested in who's going to run again and who's not going to run again. But I have to tell you, more people are really interested in opening up their lake cottages than talking about the rainy day fund. I thought what AFSCME was saying about the rainy day fund was very interesting. When one of the AFSCME union leaders said, don't take that, or take that $50 million out and save our jobs. But with what Horner said was so right. The size of the budget shortfall that's coming, we can't afford to take money out of the kitty.
There was a real erudite discussion on the floor of the Senate late yesterday afternoon about doing away with the precinct caucus system. And a bill to get rid of the caucus system and move the primary to June got 25 votes on the floor of the Senate. Is that coming next year? Are we going to be...
I got to believe that you've got to hold a mirror under the nose of the primary or the caucus system in Minnesota to see if it's still alive. Barely a heartbeat. If somebody like my friend Pat Versia here mounted a campaign like they did a year ago to put the presidential campaign or primary battle on the ballot in Minnesota, I think they could have wiped out the caucus systems. I mean, people are so fed up with the idea of it being taken over by a handful of people and ending it one way and it really not having a representative feel that they just want to do away with it. They want to go back to where it's more inclusive.
And this is not just, it's not DFL either.
Yeah,
Dean Hartle and Mel Frederick.
Was that a surprise? Because it seems that the DFLers have been the ones to most complain about the caucus system, but here were the Republicans coming out.
The majority of the problems are occurring in the Republican Party. It's not, actually the situation in the Democratic Party this year isn't that bad. We are not having the same kind of, we're not having the same kind, it's not quite as intense though. We're not having quite the same number of single issue problems. If we were, you wouldn't see Paul Wellstone leading in one race and Rudy Perpich doing quite well in the other. But no question, the system is in a whole bunch of trouble. Less than 2% of the state's registered voters showed up at caucuses this year.
Well, speaking of showing up, one of the most pathetic showings was the Century Club dinner for our own Republican Party. We used to get between 3,000 and 5,000 people that would attend that every single year. They'd drive in from War Road and Staples. This year, I think we were lucky if there were 400 people there.
I think that's right, but part of what's happening too, though, is that you have some awfully strong personalities who are dominating both parties. I mean, Rudy Perpich, you like him or not, very strong personality that transcends the party. Senator Boschwitz, who was on earlier, same kind of strong personality.
Let me jump to that. We asked Senator Boschwitz to size up his opponents, and he ducked that one and said no. He didn't duck it, he said no, I'm not going to.
Well, good.
So,
do we get to now?
Yes, would you please, all of you, let's size them up. Tom Berg, Paul Wellstone, Jim Nichols. Well, what's happened there? What's going on?
Well, heaven help the DFL if Wellstone's the nominee.
He claims he's going to be.
Well, good luck, but it would be fun to run against Wellstone.
Chris and I are rooting for him.
We're rooting for him. We really are. My opinion that Tom Berg is the strongest candidate that the DFL could put up, because I think Tom Berg would draw Republican votes from Rudy Boschwitz.
But where's Tom Berg's campaign?
But he's a strong candidate of a weak field.
All right, you
Well,
say he's a strong candidate, but where's Tom Berg's campaign?
Well, I think Berg's campaign is centered on what we'd call the old line traditional DFLers, labor people who would, cover the great middle of the DFL party.
The ones who work for a living.
An awful lot of people like that, but Paul Wellstone, with his work on the Dukakis campaign, the Rainbow Coalition, has brought an awful lot of new people active into the caucus system. Yea, it may be the end of the life for the caucus system, but that they've come in, and I think that's given him his edge. Now, you may point to all the polls about how Boschwitz is going to beat him, but I'll tell you, it'll be an interesting, one hell of a good fight, because there's nobody more exciting on the campaign trail than Paul Wellstone.
Now remember, this is a family show.
3rd District Congress. We had 15 names here a week ago, and now it looks like Lou DeMars and Ember Reichgott and Olson,
Jim Ramstad.
Hallberg, and Ramstad on the Republic. It narrowed down pretty quick.
A lot of reality comes with the passage of time, and that's, as I said then, that's a Republican district, and it's going to cost a ton of dough to run it. They're saying $750,000, and I think they're shortchanging
The
it.
best chance for the Democrats is to have both Hallberg and Jim Ramstad in a primary. Have that primary fought over abortion. The winner would be somewhat weakened, and then a Democrat would have a shot.
One of the things that makes Lou DeMars interesting is that he can raise a ton of money.
Yes, he can.
And
Makes
you
him
can
an
chew gum
affordable
and walk.
candidate.
All right,
Yes.
Pat Farcia, you're going to get the last question. Hatch and Perpich are each claiming to be ahead in the caucus count. Who do we believe?
Well, I think the reality will be that they will both enter the convention with roughly the same number of delegates. Maybe, at least as of today, the governor has a few more. But I don't know that that's good news for Mike Hatch. Mike Hatch is playing a dangerous game right now. He's saying he's going to lock up the endorsement on the first ballot. If it doesn't happen, the thing can kind of spiral out of control.
Did you see that Channel 11 program on Hatch on Purple Cross? I think they ought to get the Pulitzer.
That's the last shot you get, because we got to tell the folks that Chris will be gone for about a month. She's going over to cause trouble for Gorbachev in Russia.
That's true. Chris Sand, have a wonderful time in the Soviet Union. Pat Farcia, Tom Horner, DJ Larry, as always.
What's a wonderful
Thank you.
time in the Soviet Union?
It's time for Almanac's weekly answer to Friday the 13th, the index file question. Last week, our question was political and artistic. Here's a picture of the famous Minuteman statue in Concord, Massachusetts, created by sculptor Daniel Chester French. Now, we told you that French is also known locally for a piece of art he added to a famous Minnesota building, a building where business of government is done. We asked you, what did sculptor Daniel Chester French add to a Minnesota government building? As usual, we gave you a totally useless clue about not assuming it was in the metro area. Most of you were onto us, but not all of you.
I believe it is the nude in the lotus blossom in front of the Veterans Preference Building.
The answer to the question is the Voyager in Crane Lake.
I think that the Daniel Chester French sculpture is the Father of Waters sculpture in the Minneapolis City Hall.
Your clue for this week's guessing of Daniel French's artwork can only be too easy to guess. Mr. French had to design the bar at the Commodore Hotel.
Nope, we were not looking for the Commodore, but for the correct answer, let's go to this anonymous viewer.
I believe there are several statues hanging over the doorway to the Minnesota State Capitol that were sculpted by Mr. French. They depict different attributes that the state legislature supposedly should follow. And when they were first put up around the turn of the century, there was some doubt that they were too revealing for Midwestern people.
Yes, the sculptures representing wisdom, courage, bounty, truth, integrity, and prudence hover over the south entrance to the state capitol. Now, many of you also guessed that the quadriga, the famous golden horses on the Capitol dome, which is sort of correct. French collaborated on the horses with sculptor Edward Potter, but the statues of legislative virtues were his alone. All right, let's move on to another one of our famous mystery person puzzlers. His name is Paul Otis Sr. He's not pictured here because a picture might give away the answer. A native of Massachusetts, Paul Otis Sr. currently resides in Duluth, Minnesota. He owns a distinction that no one else in the world can claim. Here is your one clue, so listen up. His claim to fame is connected to a 4-day event in 1912 that had something to do with New York. Now, you know your job. Tell us, what is Paul Otis Sr.'s claim to fame? Index File fans, we long to hear from you, so call our answering machines with your guess. The number is 612-229-1428. You're welcome to use any reference materials you like as long as you use proper footnote form. Now, that number again is 612-229-1428. Our lines stay open all night to record your answers and comments about tonight's program. And last week, we featured parts of a dinner conversation with national conservative leaders who were in town for the inaugural conference of the Center for the American Experiment. The topic was poverty, and we expected to hear from you, and boy, did we ever.
I thought your segment on the conservatives was particularly ironic tonight, with the group of 5 sitting around in an obviously very nice restaurant eating a high-priced meal, talking about how all assistance should be taken away from the lazy poor. And Linda Chavez, especially with her plan for the poor in Brazil to sell pencils. Brazil, which is thought to have 24 million street children. I wonder if there are enough people to buy all those pencils. Made me lose my appetite.
The conservative think tank members talked about holding poor people to the same sort of responsibilities everybody else is held to. Are they talking about the responsibilities they're held to in their tenured professorships and their other insular positions where they're making over $50,000 a year? Or are they talking about the reality for poor people of working at minimum wage jobs with inadequate housing and inadequate transportation?
We keep saying, oh, the poor are corrupt. If you give them a dime, they'll spend it on crack. What a bunch of crap. When have the poor ever been trusted to manage their affairs? When have they ever been given a chance? These workfare programs and punishing parents and families if their children don't go to school is just adding oppression upon oppression. It is just absolutely absurd to have a bunch of fat cats sitting around eating a big dinner talking about the poor not being able to manage their lives. How the hell would they know?
They were so stupid they didn't realize how ridiculous they looked as they were feeding themselves and trying to act as intellectuals, when in reality it was nothing but a pseudo-analysis of what is the largest problem that we have in our society, which is people like themselves.
Certainly something you saw tonight as you riled up. We hope so anyway. 612-229-1428 is where to find us. And remember, we want to hear your opinions about anything. A program note before we head out. Next week is Earth Week, of course, and as part of our programming, KTCA will be airing the Great Minnesota Water Fight, a quiz show featuring famous families being tested on their knowledge of what else? Water. Hosted by our own J.G. Preston and Peggy Knapp. The show airs on KTCA next Tuesday, April 17th at 8 p.m., right after Almanac midweek. Again, that's Tuesday at 8. Greater Minnesota viewers, check your local listings for the Great Minnesota Water Fight. That's all for tonight. For Eric Leslie Escala, this is Jan Ingrid Smaby. Happy Easter, happy Laotian New Year, happy holidays, happy Earth Week, happy Angel Series, happy good night.
Coming up next, from the University of Minnesota, host Denise Johnson and her studio guests discuss race, class, and addiction on Minnesota Issues, next here on Channel 2.
Funding for Almanac is provided in part by Larkin, Hoffman, Daly, and Lindgren, attorneys at law, providing complete legal services for Minnesotans. Norstan Incorporated, a distributor for telecommunications equipment products, including IBM Rome. Browning Ferris Industries, providing environmentally sound solid waste solutions. Minnesota's credit unions, people helping people. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, providing more than 1 million Minnesotans with the care behind the card. And Gabbard's Furniture and Design Studio of Edina. There's no place like home, and there's no place like Gabbard's. Arts Reporting on Almanac is presented through a grant from Super America and its 95 employee-operated stores throughout Minnesota. Almanac is a production of KTCA TV for the stations of Minnesota Public Television.
What steps can you and your family take in your own home to help survive the drought and preserve Minnesota's fresh water? It's a tough challenge, and that's why this week you can play along when Mark Rosen and his family and Geraldine Steele Battle and her family face off in the great Minnesota water fight Tuesday night at 8 here on Channel 2.
He is a playwright, an author, who was